Welcome back, everybody. We have had an incredibly thought-provoking 2 days here at the Green Games Summit, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our final session of the event, a big wrap-up panel featuring chairs from this afternoon's discussions. Welcome back to the stage, everybody.
Hello, everybody, and including me. Hello, I was not chairing any panel sessions, but I have been listening intently. My name is Jo Twist. I'm the CEO of Ukie, and I'm delighted to just chair this final wrap-up and summary panel, just to draw out some key points, a little bit reflecting over the last 2 days, and perhaps identifying what the main things we need to take forward as an industry are. Having had such wonderful talks over the last 2 days. And I just want to thank everyone for their participation and their attention and their questions. It's just been absolutely brilliant. My brain is full. So I'm going to kick off and go to Trista first. Your panel was incredibly interesting. So I think this kind of defining scope is a very difficult question for many, particularly as an industry where we've got a whole bunch of players using energy and devices and so on. Tell me what you think. Just let's remind ourselves of the main points you think came out of your discussion today.
Well, not only in the discussion on my panel, but also listening to the next 2 panels, the real game changer is when someone puts their hands up and says, hey, I have an idea, and gets their head together with a bunch of like-minded individuals, and they create critical mass. And we saw that with Dan Jacobs and the mobile games decarbonization study that was done with the Alliance. We saw it with Oscar when he attended the Ukie Green Code session and decided to start up a workshop of his own, gathering voices from all across Africa on the same topic. We saw it with Adrian when he got really interested in gamification and started up a whole research network of people examining something different. And it's that spirit to realize that individuals, if they seize an idea, and if anyone in the audience has a wild idea that's burning, to put words on it, to put it out there, and to find and use the different groups that are coming together, either through the Playing for the Planet Alliance or the IGDA Climate SIG, and any other number of groups that are coming together to kind of bring critical mass to your idea. And once you get momentum going, then it seems to just spin from one person to another to another. And as we've seen in the past 2 days, the results now are really coming into fruition. You know, some of us are actually seeing some of the things that were proposed in Deb's Game Jam showing up in games that people are just encountering in everyday activity. And that's really fun to see. So we really look forward, and also having this event has also been an inspiration. I'm sure lots of people will be thinking about the things that they'd like to prepare for the next summit.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it, about coming together and sharing that knowledge, because it's not just through the summit, it's not just through, it's not down to one organization, but I think having a central place to start where you're sharing links, you're sharing best practice. Do you think how important is that, do you think, coming out of this summit to try and achieve? And where does that live?
Yeah, the best practice is really interesting, and also the sharing across really vast experiences, I think, also is really interesting. So in the Green Code session, Oscar didn't get, because of technical difficulties, he didn't get quite as much time to get into the depth about the commonalities between the challenges that the African games market is facing compared to game developers all over the world. Though we realize that each studio that's trying to develop a game is tight for funding, is tight for time. There's crunch all over the place. But yet those that are really championing greening, green code, green business activities are also very ambitious leaders in everything they do. And so the ones that are kind of rising to the top in that, I think, are really remarkable. The other piece is that climate is one of those themes that is really bringing us all together no matter where we live. And we're accustomed to thinking about and relating to members from the African gaming community talking about the scarcity of energy or bandwidth and so on. But the climate difficulties that we're facing right now are making us all realize that we are operating in a world of extreme scarcity in terms of renewable energy that we need in order to accomplish our development goals, and also to keep the climate underneath the global goals for 1.5 degrees. So that element of scarcity also spurs a ton of innovation. So joining together and also reaching across really vast experiences helps us put some of the challenges that we face in perspective and realize that's also the kind of grist for the mill of creating these new innovations and insights that are also those things that are really going to boost profits, well-being, people's happiness and reward at work, and are also going to do a lot for the planet.
It seems like a total win-win for everyone. I mean, Dan, moving to you, you chaired that panel session on green code and coding. I remember when you first started talking about this, when you were co-authoring the Green Game Guide. You know, it was actually just such an interesting revelation, even just down to the mundane things that you do in the workplace. You know, in terms of all these folders of emails that we've got. You know, what for you is sort of the main takeaway of that particular session, because that's quite a chunky kind of bit this to get your head around as a developer.
Yeah, it is chunky, but it's quite an emerging area. So actually, you know, I think there's still far more questions and answers, and we were never going to really cover that in half an hour. But I think, you know, giving people a flavour about what can be achieved, what the possibilities are, is, you know, that's why I wanted to have discussion today. I think the three things that really stand out for me from the session. And yeah, Oscar didn't get a fair crack of the whip. We should make sure we're going to have follow-ups to this as well, so we'll make sure he gets a chance to have a platform to speak properly. But I think the point is we need to think beyond kind of Western player bases and developer communities when we're talking about all of this. It's all too easy to get caught up, you know, just thinking about we've got limitless power and bandwidth and so on, and that's of course part of the problem with the mindset we have. I think it's really interesting. The two questions I raised around that kind of conundrum of, you know, don't developers just already optimize, squeeze everything out they can out of a GPU and a CPU already? That's just part of the job. So if you did save energy, doesn't just get filled out with more content. I think that's really interesting. But that kind of partner question to that about player demand for, is there a plateau for performance from consumers? For example, there is only a certain limit of frame rate that the human eye can take in. So, you know, there's no point producing 1,000 frames per second because we can't comprehend it or see it. So wonder whether those two questions resolving over time might sort of solve each other. And the best thing about it was having Rebecca, who's an expert in it, which I'm not, saying that it was possible to get together principles of green coding fairly quickly. And I think that's something we really want to do. Just, you know, when we had our workshop, there was a lot of developers there who'd already sort of, by being there, had said they're interested in it. But how can you make this? There was concern that you would introduce another layer of complexity or kind of pressure and demands on developers. Hey, make this energy efficient as well as making it the best game you can. So how can we get a set of principles that help people go, actually, it's not you know, an extra level of work. It's not a burdensome thing to do. It's something, if you think about from the outset, it can have a real impact on the power output of the industry. So yeah, that was my takeaways from the session, really.
So who I mean, again, where does the responsibility lie? How do we collectively create those principles? You know, and a sort of kind of secondary question, I'm always really interested in how we get that understanding about programming in an efficient way at an education level, you know. So whose responsibility is it to do that?
Well, it's with all this, as Trista said, it's bringing all those people together and setting them off to do like amazing things. So I think Rebecca said that there are and the work that Dan Jacobs had done with Xbox and the mobile developers is already showing you can start measuring device output. And then once you've done that, you can then start measuring, right, if I change this in the software, what happens? So you need to start with that. But I also think, with all this, we don't really have time to spend years and years developing methodologies. We just need to get on with it. So I think just encouraging, setting people off, say, look, do this. And I said, when we spoke to our group, there was certainly things that just had a kind of common sense. You knew if you did this, it would have a positive impact. So just doing that, seeing what happens yourself and building up that knowledge base. I just think there's some potential partnerships with academic institutions who can accelerate it. And I mentioned things like R&D projects or industry competitions, game jams, all sorts of things we can do to accelerate it. But it ultimately comes down to that combination of just getting on with it and seeing what happens, because we have to. There is a sense of urgency in all this. Don't forget, this isn't like a nice thing to have, a nice project to kind of carry out. This has a serious sort of sense of urgency to it. A combination of that and doing some kind of robust research as we go along to validate it, I think.
And it's also a responsibility for other sectors. People often talk about, I suppose it's sort of relevant to the previous panel as well, about Netflix and who's what's Netflix doing about the way its energy or even the way that the programming works in other sectors. So is that knowledge being shared across sectors, do you think, effectively?
Yes and no. I mean, there is research out there. It's a question of how many people are aware of it on a sort of day-to-day basis within certain industries. We had John Coomey yesterday, so he's been working on energy usage in the IT sector for decades. So there's definitely research out there. How much the sectors are speaking to each other and how much, particularly, I guess, the content delivery sectors speak to each other could be improved, I'm sure. And I think, as I said in my intro to the session, it's definitely potential for the games industry to lead the thinking here, because we are, that embodiment of kind of digital content delivery, kind of technology, creativity, and so on. So definitely room for collaboration and for us to lead.
I'm going to move on to Deborah, but just a reminder, if you do have any questions that you want to ask in this panel session, you do still have time to post them in the chat. So please do, or if you have an observation you want to share. Deborah, I'm really always so interested in how we mobilize this huge audience that we have as game developers in the games industry, and how we inspire them. And it's not just through kind of themes in games, it's through actually harnessing the community, design principles that actually encourage intrinsic motivation, not just extrinsic motivation. Tell us what you kind of took away from your panel session, as well as the reflections from yesterday as well.
Sure, yeah. I think one of the things that really popped today in the latest session was, we talk a lot about trying to include these themes in our games, or just trying to tackle these issues like it's the right thing to do. But sometimes we kind of negate the business case for doing that as well. And I think something that really came through strongly in the last session, especially from Georgia at FGOL, was that, they tried to track some of the metrics around including some of these like green activations within their games. So they saw an increase in engagement from their player base. They saw more players actually taking part in their events that were themed around this content. They saw a higher click-through rate on their interstitials that they were doing. And so I think, as much as we're all doing this just because it's good and it's the right thing to do, there is also a business case for doing this stuff. And I think the more that the consciousness of our players shifts, the more they're going to be asking for companies to really deliver this kind of content and to be companies that care. And also, for companies not just to sort of be the places that try to save players or try to save audiences, but to empower them, right? I think more and more we're in like the Greta Thunberg generation, where people want to be agents of change. They don't want to look to someone else to save them. They want to do the changing. They want to take part. They want to be active. And so I think the more that games give an outlet to players, the more successful they will also be. And I think another interesting thing that came out was they did another survey where they asked their players about how they actually saw the mobile game or how they saw the company. And, a large portion said like, well, of course it's a mobile game company, but actually 30% said that they were a conservation brand just because of the messaging that they had incorporated in some of their titles. And so I think that just like signals that there's just this massive opportunity for games to not just be seen in one way. You know, I think Sam Barrett from UNIP, he talks a lot about changing the narrative of games, you know, from something that is violent or causes addiction or what have you, to potentially being an industry that can really change things and, create positivity in the world. And I think when you see that players are actually associating games with a conservation brand like that, to me, that really like stood out, because it's changing the way that people perceive games and gaming as a whole. So I think those things really popped. And then as well, on the slightly sadder, bleaker side, just from the conservation space, that there is a potential for games to offer new revenue streams for conservation. And when there is that like $800 billion gap, that is quite a lofty goal to try to reach. And so, while we say trying to incorporate players and studios, etc., but as Adrian from Luke Hoffman Institute is saying, it's also about corporations. And so I think one of the sort of broader reflections of the last 2 days is, I think this is such an amazing space for bringing all those different sides together. We heard from government, from industry, from conservation, from academia. So I think just, like Trista was saying as well, like having all those people come together and then birthing something new and running with it. Just so much opportunity.
I was really interested in the theme about the balance between just providing players with entertainment. We're kind of factories of fun, versus being preachy. And that's a really difficult balance to strike, isn't it? I mean, I guess that's just about sort of learning and understanding the feedback from your players.
Yeah, I think definitely, because, as game developers, like, your community's best. And I think the more that we listen to our player communities about the kind of content that they like, realistically, we have a really good pulse on what our players like and what they engage with in general. And so I think it is more, rather than trying to shoehorn in some preachy content, it's about understanding what seamlessly, like naturally aligns with your player community, with your title. What works for one game isn't going to work for another necessarily. Like, I do think there are lots of when we talked about best practices, for example, that might work across a lot of different games. But it really is a unique thing for each game and each player community, because they don't all behave in the same way. They don't all care about the same things. What might be, a small change for one game could be a massive thing for another, for an audience of gamers that is quite switched on when it comes to this idea of climate change or biodiversity. Just having some messaging within a game might not be that big of a deal. But if you're trying to talk to an audience that might not even really still believe that climate change is a problem, having any kind of messaging about that is actually really pushing the boundaries. So I think it's about knowing what will push your audience specifically, rather than trying to have like a one size fits all.
I'm going to close with a question that has come in, and I don't think you're going to be able to answer this, but Trista, you might. But I will open with that, and I'll go to each of you just to maybe identify one action that attendees can take tomorrow, immediate action to start on this path. But Trista, I'll start with you, because the question is, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but what are the possible solutions to reduce cloud gaming, 4K streaming, consumption of resources? Is that a question we can answer now?
Yeah, I think it is, especially because it really involves everyone that has been speaking on all of these panels, whether they are data experts or they're the game designers or they're the game engine representatives or they're the gamers themselves. And so there's, that question comes from the future, because we know that streaming of games is going to be a new mode of business, and it's going to change a lot of things. At the same time, there's also a lot of hidden potential buried in our ability to use the cloud to our advantage, whether it's in making sure that the footprints are as low as possible, or the servers are located in places where they have access to renewable energy and they're equally distributed around the globe so that emerging markets can reach information and access to those servers, not just for gaming, but also for crucial services that will bring development to the populations that really need it and use it for education purposes or addressing equity issues. So those pieces involve all of us. And I think to turn it back to the first question you asked, what is it that each person that attended here can do tomorrow, or even today? I think in the past 2 days, you have obviously heard at least one idea that you think has potential. And I think the most powerful thing you can do is immediately either write a note to yourself or a note to a colleague that it really inspired you to think about a wild idea, something really out of the box that you think might excite them or be really intriguing, and reach out to them. Write it down, send that email, get the conversation going, because by putting words on it, it's a real stimulus. It gets people excited, turn them on to other resources, and that's the kind of thing that can get a lot of this big work moving.
Dan, same question to you.
Yes, similar to Tristan, I think a couple of speakers touched on it. This shouldn't be something we sort of approach with kind of trepidation. We should approach it with excitement. I think someone said we need all the people with all the ideas to all work on this together. So I think, this is an issue we should face. All the attributes the industry's got. It's like, face it positively. Solutions are out there. Be future looking, innovative, problem solving. We can make a difference in that respect. And I just sort of urge people just to get on with it, whether that's decarbonising your business or think about innovative ways to display data in a games type way, or incorporating conservation themes into your games. There's so much you can do, and there's now, there's a big kind of group of people internationally in the games who do want to do something about it. So yeah, I just get on with it and use the kind of innovation and expertise that we've got at our disposal.
As your colleague, Dan, I expect a note immediately after this session. Deborah, final thought with you.
Oh gosh, one thing that you can do tomorrow. I mean, echo Trista and Dan. Like, just start somewhere, 100%. And then also, we are talking about games, so look for games that care about this stuff. I think that's one of the best ways that you can contribute as a player, is play the games that are trying to tackle this stuff and support them. And if a game that you love is not doing anything, start asking the developers to do it. Because if it's coming from the players, there's a much better chance they'll do it. So,
well, thank you so much, all of you, for fantastic job over the last 2 days as well. I would encourage everyone just to, if you can't find those games, join the game jam and make one. We have these tools that are easy to use. So that's it from this panel as a wrap up. Thank you so much. Again, thank you to all the speakers on the panel sessions, and I will hand back to Jordan.